So welcome everybody to In Conversation With, where we speak to friends, respected loved ones of the bunga, people from the local music scene. And today, continuing our celebrations of the 40th anniversary of the beginnings of the bunga, I'm joined by Booger Paul Maven to get his point of view. Welcome, mate.
Okay.
All right. Must feel a little bit surreal here being back here after so long.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's obviously changed a little.
It has changed loads. I was just looking around when I walked in at this sort of carpet and curtains and lights and things like that. It's mint though. It's good being back. It's good being back. It's really nice to see that it's still ticking over, you know what I mean? Who would have thought that?
I know. We'll touch on that. I mean, did you ever even, was it part of your thoughts that this was something that could keep going?
Nah, not originally. Yeah. Not originally. I think it was sort of a spur of the moment thing when it first started. It was just sort of developed out of a germ of an idea, and then it sort of gained momentum over the next 4 or 5 years. But even at its height, I would never have thought, right, when in 2021 I'm going to come back and sit in a recording studio and speak to somebody who's picked the baton up. Just nowhere. It was always sort of, right, well, let's do it. We need to do it. And let's see how far we can run with it. Yeah. But not 30, 40 years. That's just mad.
So you mentioned that, we were talking earlier on about how those 40 years have just obviously flown out, and that you were 16 at the time,
just left school
at the first meeting,
1980. Yeah.
I mean, what was life like, for you as a young lad then? You'd been to see bands before you went into your music. What was it like growing up, and what really kind of got this? What really made everybody make this big leap, I
don't know. I mean, I was I'd harboured, I wanted to be in a band, you know what I mean? I didn't harbour any desire to be in a band until I heard the Pistols, really. That was sort of the big wake up for a lot of people when Pistols, I can be in a band as well. So I wanted to be in a band, and I joined a band at school, through necessity more than out else, really. You went to Broadway, didn't you?
Yeah.
Remember Mr. Tunn? Was Mr. Tunn there, or had he gone to Farah?
Yeah,
I think he'd moved to Farah, and he had a school band.
Right, okay.
And my mate who I used to go to gigs with, his dad had a car, so he used to take us to Newcastle to see bands and that. And he was a drummer, and he went, I'm in this band. Do you want to? And I went, well, I want to be a drummer. And he went, well, I'm the drummer. So he says, come down and we'll you just see what you think. And the band, fucking half of it, they were like a school band. They were called Livewire.
Right.
And they were called Livewire because they were sponsored by the Northeast Electricity Board, NEEB.
Okay, NEEB, yeah.
And they had like a uniform, like brown flares and a cream shirt and ties and that. And but there was a bass, and they did a bass player. And he went, well, you can play the bass. And I went, well, I can't play it now. And he went, well, just borrow that. It was old Hofner bass, ancient. And he went, take it home. This is Mr. Tunn. So I took it home, and I can't remember, possibly the Ramones or something, I don't know. Yeah. Like, that's a piece of piss, isn't it? So I went back and I went, I cannot borrow the bass. And he went, you can borrow the bass as long as you join the band. So I joined this band called Livewire.
With a brown and cream uniform.
Brown and like brown. There's your uniform. You've got to wear that, like brown flares and that. So I had to join this band, and then so I wanted to be in a proper band. You know what I mean? So when I left school, 16, I can't remember. I know how I got in the band. My mum worked in a baker's, and the lad who worked in the baker's, he was on a govy scheme. And she said, he's in a band. And I went, all right. He's looking for a bass player. And I went, all right. Who was it? And it was Cess Irwin.
Oh, right.
And I went, what, Cess Irwin from the High Speed Heroes? And she went, aye. And I went, all right, I'll have a go at that, like. So I went down his. He lived in Cairo Street down, and he says, I've got this drummer, Marty Yule. So, and that was my first band. That was I Breathe first. So that was me, Cess Irwin, and Marty. And we practiced in in his bedroom. So I always wanted to be in a band at that time, but didn't ever think of anything like this would happen. Do you know what I mean?
But so there wasn't anywhere to practice.
No,
it was bedrooms.
No,
it was
we literally practiced in his bedroom.
Yeah.
And
and there were obviously other bands in the same boat, and that they had nowhere to go.
Yeah, I mean there was rehearsal rooms. But we couldn't afford it. They were expensive, and they were sort of really out of touch. And none of us, some bands, I know bands who like practiced in youthies and stuff like that. I didn't enter youth clubs, so I was quite a loner when I left school. So I didn't really know anybody. So it was the bedroom. It was the drummer's bedroom. And at home, I'd just sit and play along to, I'd pick an album and play it until I could play it proficiently, and that was how I practiced. No amp, note, just playing. I've got teeth marks on my bass. So I used to sit there, put my teeth on the top of the bass so I could hear it. That's how and the teeth marks are still there.
Class. So what then made you think of, organising this?
Well, it wasn't us.
Right.
It wasn't us. It was we used to go to the Durham Book Centre, and there was a sign in the door. I mean, you've probably heard the story a million times, Kenny. There was a sign in the door, and I think my group of friends had grown a little bit, so I knew Jimmy Tate, who was in the High Speed Heroes, but was in a band called Patrick, and his mate John, who unfortunately just died. I was at his funeral last week, so I'd start to know the people. Jerome Dag was friends with Marty. So, and I'd start to sort of there's a bit of a thing going on. There's a bit of a scene going on with like-minded people, tend to gravitate to get towards each other, don't they? Like-minded people, especially with music. Yeah. And there was this sign in the door, and it just said, do you want to come to a meeting about forming a musicians group or something? And it said something about a rehearsal room, and I was like, sounds interesting. Yeah. And I think it might have been Jimmy Tate that said, go and look at that sign in the Book Centre window. So we went down, and that was the first meeting down at the old orphanage. Yeah. So that'll have been September 1980. So I'd been left school about 4 months. Yeah.
And did you know so many people were going to go? I mean, you obviously mentioned Durham Book Centre there, and I've heard that versions of that story. As a kid, around that time, I was probably going down there early on the Saturday to get stink bombs and get whatever. It was a bit of a focus point for for kids really because of what it did. Yeah. But obviously, I knew that punks were going, and people older than me, but never saw that there was like this scene bubbling. Did you know that there were so many interested? Because there was quite a lot of that first meeting, wasn't there?
I think do you know what? I haven't got a really clear memory of the first meeting. I remember Jimmy being there. I remember, I think Tommy Eyre was there, because he was from the East End. Okay. There might have been a few other people from that area there, because it was like the orphanage. Yeah. And I remember Andy Gibson being there. But I cannot really remember. I remember going and getting pissed afterwards at the Painted Wagon. I was telling the lads about the Painted Wagon earlier on. We went for a pint afterwards. But I can't really remember how many were there. There wasn't loads and loads of people there. But I remember being quite excited by it. Yeah. About and because Andy had introduced himself and said, there's a prospect of this thing happening, and we've we could look for premises, and I've heard of this garage we might be able to use, and so me and Jimmy Tate were like, I didn't know Jimmy Tate very well, but we both came out going, oh, that sounds amazing. Are you into it? And I was like, I've got now to do, so it sounds great. Yeah. So, but I can't remember many people being there. I've told there's about 40 people there. Yeah. It's like that Pistols gig in Manchester, isn't it?
Yeah, everyone was there, wasn't they? Yeah.
Well, I was.
So what? How long was it then until this, first home at Borough Road?
Christie's the one with the dates, man. I spent a lot of time drinking a lot of beer at that time, and I'm not proud of it, but that's what I did. Yeah. So my memory, I was a year out with the opening with the bunga. Do you know what I mean? So Christie's the one with the dates, but I remember it sort of happening fairly quickly. Yeah. It's sort of I had a job. The lad down the road had got us a job in Maxwell's DIY.
Okay.
And I worked there for about 2 or 3 months. And I'd been going to the odd meeting, I think, if I remember correctly. And then he died of a massive heart attack.
Hey.
Sorry, I'm laughing because he died 20 minutes after I got out of the car. And it was in South Shields. We used to drive across the bridge, the A19 bridge. And I remember him driving going, really bad arm. He was dead 20 minutes later, you know what I mean? So I'd left this job and I'd now to do. And the day he died, I'd come down. I can't remember where I'd met Andy. I met Andy Gibson and he took us up to Ford Advice Centre.
Yeah.
And I think it was to do posters or something. We made posters. I remember cutting stuff out and sticking it on.
Yeah.
And I think it was a poster for a meeting or something like that. And then after that, it just seemed to sort of gather momentum really quickly. It was like, oh, we've got a building. We need some steps. We need some wood. Steps need building. Yeah. We need to create sort of steps. The echo's coming. And I was like, it sort of was like real sort of momentum quite quickly.
Because it was on the first floor, but there were no steps to get up there.
There was no steps. There was no steps. You couldn't get up to the thing. We had to build steps.
Yeah.
And I remember creosoting them on a really hot day.
Obviously, no health and safety, no regulations.
Gloves. No, just now it was, let's build some steps. I think Andy got stuck right into building the steps. I helped. I creosoted them, and then we had this room, and suddenly we had a room with a plug and a light bulb, and you could play that. It was mad.
I mean, looks like a decent sized space. And I mean, how often were you down there? And how much did you was it?
I didn't, to be honest. I didn't use it loads because it was difficult for us to get kit down there. Right. Other people used it more than I did. I was there a lot at the setting up, and I was there a lot for meetings, but it wasn't sort of ours. We didn't have the ownership of it. Yeah. So to get in there, you had to go to this lass's house and get the key off her on Grey Road in Hendon and take the key down, open yourself, lock it up, take the key back. And so I couldn't be asked for that. So we still had a nice warm. There was no heating on out, you know what I mean? So I don't think our band practiced there much, but that didn't stop us being involved quite heavily with what was happening with the collective. By this time, it was the Sunderland Musicians Collective, and there was the paper we would seem to be in the local paper all the time, and so
you seem to attract that you always in the publicity shots. Were you the poster boy?
I don't know about that, Kenny. I think I'm a gobshite, So I wasn't I just seemed to come natural to us to speak to people about it. So I was on the phone when we finally got a phone out going to us. I was on the phone a lot. I was half decent at English, so I could turn my hand to writing. I wrote a lot of fundraising letters, and I was quite happy to talk to people, who were coming. The BBC came, Tankies came, so poster boy,
secretary. But you were actually the secretary, weren't you?
Yeah, I think I did the secretary. I think everybody sort of changed around a bit. I did the secretary. I did. I was chair for a while. We organised meetings with other collectives that were starting. So I remember chairing a meeting with loads of people from all over the place. That come from all over the country, I think.
I remember reading some of the notes. I think there was a book left here when I took over, and I remember reading some of the notes, and they were written just as you would have spoken to each other, and I loved that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure in years to come it'll be in the
little
museum.
Book?
Yeah.
Well, I wrote most of them minutes.
Remember the stories about the deaf lads wanting a room and just different stuff. It was a great little book.
Yeah, I got it off Raf when I did my MA. When he handed us this little book, just minutes, great errors. So so I've still got it, and I was like, oh bloody hell, that's my handwriting, and I'd forgot all about it. So that must have been the book I had when I was doing the secretary thing. So it's all my handwriting, and I'm like, neat handwriting. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And
it's totally legible, just about.
I know, and I'm terrible normally. And there's a real pride to it.
Yeah.
So it was quite nice looking through it because it was a really important part of my life, Kenny, like a massive part of my life.
Of course.
And when I looked, it was quite an emotive thing looking at that because I was like, Jesus, I really meant this. I meant it. Do you know what I mean? I really got into it, and I was there all the time. And that was Green Terrace, not so much Borough Road, but.
So obviously, we move forward at Green Terrace. That, like you've said, that was the kids with the keys to the sweet shop. You had the keys, no knocking on someone's door, no whatever, and within reason, to kind of do as you please.
Yeah.
But I mean, how did that feel?
Well, it was mad. It was insane. You know, it was like Green Terrace School. I had the keys. I was 18-year-old. It was just daft that we were giving them. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, did it? Because now it just sounds crazy. Did it? You know, were you almost surprised and thinking, "Hold on, this someone's playing a joke and say," or did it seem, "Well, on, we've kind of earned our stripes, as it were. We've done what we've done. We've showed that we're not, righteous."
I think there was an element of we were unstoppable. We had real ambition to pull something off with it. And you've got to bring Andy and Mick and people like that into that. You know, this is the myth that it was just a bunch of 18-year-olds needs to be put to rest.
Yeah,
because it wasn't. You know, there was Andy Gibson and there was Mick Catmull and there was a whole sort of periphery of people who were involved who were older than us. Do you know what I mean? They seemed really old at the time, but they weren't actually that older than us. Andy wasn't massively older than I was, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
But they were like the adults.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It just seemed that we were unstoppable. I had this real faith that we could do something quite important with the place, but in the short term, it was just like, we've got this skill. We're not only for a few years. Let's make a go of it. And there was no sort of limit to what I thought we could achieve with it, really.
Yeah. I mean, what had you written out aims? Did you have your version of things in your head, other than putting gigs on? Were there any kind of community altruistic sort of ideas that you thought, it's more than just having fun?
For me, it was always about putting bands on and having somewhere, but it was the sort of the nub of it. But it was more than that. It was, it kept me sane. I was unemployed. Everybody was unemployed, and it was about this group of people who was sort of in this place doing something positive. We were surrounded by negativity, weren't we? It was a fucking shit pit, Sunderland, and there was nout, and I had no qualifications, and my prospects were fairly slim, So it was about doing something that was positive, for definite. That was a massive part of it for me, and that's why I was there every day. I lived in Green Terrace virtually. I was there every day. Totally voluntary, nothing, but the only thing was about being there and having a laugh and doing what needed to be done and getting the place sort of better and better, the best we could do it,
But say, despite these, not quite silent, but these adults in the background who were obviously helping, doing whatever, did it still feel it was run by you lot?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it was weird because Andy didn't come to the gigs. You know what I mean? He was just like, I'm not coming to the gigs. I'm not coming to the gigs. I think Mick might have come to a few, but it tended to just be us. So on a night, imagine that now. Can you imagine that? It just wouldn't happen, would it? Yeah. There's a school. How old are you? 18, 9, no bother. There's some keys. Gone, put some punk bands on. No adults there whatsoever. So it did feel like there was a massive ownership of it, and I think it's important to say about Andy and Mick and all that lot that there was no muscling in, and there was a genuine feeling on my part anyway that these blokes and women, there was that it wasn't them on the gain. They weren't after anything other than seeing what was happening and going with the momentum. And I think, you know, to like Andy and Mick and all that, the momentum of it possibly took them by surprise. I can't speak for them, but it just gained momentum so quickly. You know, BBC ringing up and wanting to do a BBC Two documentary and all that. It's just, so I think they, you know, the momentum was there and it was enough for them to sort of just be involved with it. Yeah. But I don't think there was any, you know, I mean, they were getting paid. You know, I think they were in employment, but it wasn't an altruistic thing. But it wasn't about them. So the ownership was definitely, I felt ownership of it. Yeah. I had keys. I was on the committee. I was helping to make decisions, and we were guided. You know, we were guided.
I mean, they were from youth work backgrounds, weren't they? So
I think Andy was. I don't think Mick was. No. Mick was from an arts background, so he was a photographer, and he was he was employed by to run community arts project Sunderland. Right. So they were down in Hendon, but they did. You know, Tommy was doing making the first video camera I ever saw. Tommy, you know, first sound recorder I ever saw. Tommy, and it was all coming from sort of caps, as we used to call it. And there was a dark room in there, which is how I got into photography. So Mick was from like an arts side, and he with Tommy made the Green Terrace video, and Andy was from a pure, you know, youth work side in terms of, you know, he was doing that right up until he died. Andy, wasn't he? He was. I met him when I did my MA, and he was saying. I said, so what you doing? He went, oh, it's really sad. I'm still helping young people. There's fucking no sad about Andy. That's amazing. And he was, you know, he dedicated his life to that. Didn't he?
Well, that's it. So the momentum that was gained and the success of it, and that more and more people were getting involved was the ultimate, I suppose. They've come up with an idea of whether it was born from their minds or from others to set up a collective that's gained momentum and ran something. It's kind of, you know, I don't imagine it was a box ticker, but it ticks that box, so it must have been great. I mean, how I often look back at the quality of the photographs. You're touching on there on Mick's influence.
Mickey Stewart,
you know, there are, for that period in time, for there to be so many good quality photos is actually quite strange,
Because, I haven't got any.
Yeah.
Ironically, I haven't. You know, I've spent my life as a photographer. I haven't got a single photo. I didn't have a camera.
Right.
I didn't have a camera. So Mick was the photographer, you know, and he was always there, and he always had a Pentax K1000 around his neck, snapping away. And Christy and Jill always had. So people had little cameras. I never had one. I didn't have. So when I started the MA and I went to see Christy, and he pulled out all these boxes of photos, I was like, are you joking? Have you kept? No, I didn't have a single photograph. And so I was photography became a massive part of it for me, especially the retelling of the story when I did my MA. Yeah. Was all these photographs appeared, you know, of me. Like photographs I'd never seen, like. I can't even remember that being taken. Yeah. And so the quality of the archive in terms of photography is phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them are candid photographs, aren't there? There's a few kind of posy shots, but the majority of them are kind of candid shots.
Yeah.
So you just didn't see them going on. Yeah. I mean, would you have gotten into photography if that had been around?
I think I remember seeing Mick might have came to a meeting, Mick at Green Terrace, Mick Catmull, and said, oh, I'm running an introduction day for black and white photography. You've got to be unemployed. So it was like everybody laughed, you know, so 40 odd people sat in the room. So I went down just because I was bored. Right? I had no real interest in photography at all. Right. At all. I was a bass player. And I went down and it was like a slow burn. So I went out with Jimmy Tate. We shared a camera, and we went out. We walked down to the river and along the riverbank, which was derelict. You know what I mean, like unrecognisable. There's quite a famous photograph of me with a dead rat. Yeah. So that was that day. That was the first day we went out, and we shared the camera. It was freezing cold, and we took them back. We developed them, and that was it. And it was a slow burn for me, and. You know, it wasn't an instant. I was into the process, and I was quite excited by seeing the print come up and stuff like that in the dark room. And I went, oh, it's mint that. but it wasn't like I want to be a photographer. It's sort of slow burned, and my circumstances, no qualifications, not making it in a band, never was going to. Skint, right? What do I do? All right, well, I quite enjoyed photography. Let's toy with that for a couple of months. 30 years later, do you know what I mean? So it was so it was sort of a slow burn, the photography thing. But through the bunker, if it hadn't been for the bunker, I wouldn't have got into photography. No doubt about it.
So while back at Green Terrace, while these, this day on, day out, my obviously it wasn't there, but my vision of it is from the TV program, Kids, Why Don't You? Which looked like it was these kids in a youthie kind of running this, showing you how to put cheese on top of your beans on toast or whatever. I kind of picture that. Going there for, was it a year, two?
Green Terrace?
A year that you were going there every day, almost?
Yeah, maybe, again, dates. Maybe a year, 2 years, something like that. I think that the lifespan of the place was quite short. But I remember being there all the time. And until it sort of collapsed, in the storm.
So, best gigs, worst gigs, best memories, worst memories?
At Green Terrace?
Yeah.
There was one night which wasn't really a gig. It was called Bad Music Festival.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious. It was just a proper laugh. And it was anybody could get up on stage, and it was awful. The music was shit, and I was up on stage twice, but it was a proper laugh. And I think it culminated in a pie and chip eating competition or something like that. Yeah. Cold pies and chips had been brought up from St Ignatius Chip Shop, and that was on stage, and it was just a cracking night. And there's photographs of it, and when you look at the photographs, it's just people laughing.
Yeah.
It's people laughing their backs off in a cold, badly lit, awful sound Victorian school in the middle of Sunderland during a really bad time. But there's real joy on the people's faces that were there. And I remember that night like it was yesterday. It was brilliant. And then all the other times, when all the anarcho bands started, I was in the office. I barely saw them. I'd go, who's this conflict? Yeah. Sounds shit to me. I'm going in the office and get pissed. And that's what I used to do.
So you'd we talked earlier about how your musical taste had already changed a little bit then.
Yeah.
Did you feel that yours had changed, or the sort of the tastes of the committee had changed?
I think, we alluded to this earlier on, didn't we, about, punk being dead by 1978 and stuff. That was the punk I loved, and the punk I loved sort of fizzled out between 78 and 80, and there was a few good bands, and then there was Killing Joke and stuff like that. But all this, the anarcho bands that the Sunderland bunker became,
synonymous
with, I just really didn't get it. I got the politics quite a lot. In fact, I bought the first two Crass albums, and I listened to them, and I read the lyrics, and I was like, oh yeah, that's bang on that. But the music's fucking awful. I couldn't do it. I couldn't listen to it. I just didn't get it.
Yeah.
And and that's a sonic thing, isn't it? That's a sonic thing in your ear to your brain. I just didn't get it. So I always listen. I've always been a sucker for a tune, Kenny. And my favourite band out of that time, my favourite bands tended to be quite tuneful.
Yeah.
And I just didn't get the anarcho punk thing. So the whole thing had changed for me, and I didn't get it. So it was a natural thing for me to just go, right, well, I'll start listening to something else.
Yeah.
So, I was listening to the early mod stuff, and like the Who, and like Tamla Motown, and sort of Northern Soul and stuff, like in secret, because I didn't. Flux Opinions were just like, I got it, but I didn't get the music.
I mean, do you think that, I know we've spoke about how when you look at the big groups at the gigs, it's not all just full of Mohicans and punks, and there are just some young kids who are coming down just because it's something to do to get them off the street.
Yeah.
And, Christy tells me of the fight between the skins and whatever else. But generally, when you're at those gigs, just whether that was your favourite kind of band or not, it was good atmosphere as well, and it was generally friendly stuff.
Yeah, it was great. It was absolutely great. And there was a few bits of bother at Green Terrace, but it tended just to be, like-minded people having a laugh and having a drink and Tommy's Disco, and then you'd have a band on. Some nights there was no bands on; it would just be them were my favourite nights because it wasn't that was. Even though Tommy never played What You Wanted to do ever, so there was a big and a lot of students came, and so there was a different mix of people there.
Yeah,
and it was just a great buzz, I think. But I remember being in a meeting and just saying, "Oh, can we not have any proper bands on?" I like to laugh, and they went, "What do you mean proper bands? Like proper bands, not like Crass and all that." And they were like, "Well, who's gonna come and play you, Booger? No one's gonna come and play. You've seen it, you know what I mean? It's not on the gig circuit, other than for Conflict and Flux Opinions and bands like that. So I understood why and that was it was an important. I remember seeing in the NME an interview with Conflict, and the Sunderland Bunker was mentioned. The Bunker was mentioned. It's just like there's this amazing place in Sunderland. It's like anarchy personified, and and it was in the NME, and we're like, no, famous. But for me, it was for the wrong reason. I wanted the Ruts to play, and they never were gone to. Never.
So I mean, were you as aware of any kind of negativity at that point? Obviously, before the movement to Green Terrace, despite it, anarchy being at its core and kind of socialism being its core, where we were. I remember Christy telling me about how the local authority were actually very supportive of it because there's a theory.
There's a theory of why they were supportive, though, Kenny.
Right.
There's a theory, and this goes back to when we first got Green Terrace, and this was from Andy when I interviewed Andy for my MA. He's I don't know whether I should be telling this story. There was two theories as to why we were handed the keys. One of them's sort of a political argument that there was lots of riots going on, and it was about keeping we were politicised. We were politicised. Some of us. Some of us weren't. Some of us were politicised. And I think one of the theories is that we were, let's keep them all in this place. So we know where they are and we know what they're doing and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The other theory, which is the one Andy preferred, was that at the time, the Education Committee, who gave us the keys, there was maybe a bit of hanky-panky going on between one of the councillors and one of the committee members.
Okay.
And there'd been some bad blood. Now, one of them had gone off on holiday for the meeting we attended to ask for the keys.
Right.
And the theory is, the rumour was, that we were giving them just to piss this other councillor off. And Andy said, I really want that one to be true. Whether it is or not, I don't know. So there's two theories. There was the political thing and the fact that we might have just been given the keys to piss somebody off. So you can cut that out if you want. You can cut that out if you want. But that was what Andy told me.
Yeah.
I don't know what was true. I don't know. We were given these keys.
But despite kind of not necessarily being a classier punk at that time, but probably by most people outside of your circle, they would have looked at you as a seen you as a punk, despite kind of being into other things. Was there a feeling of we're getting away with murder, it's the we still looked at as kind of outcasts almost, because I think that was what I remember of punks, is that despite it being a really strong kind of movement within, from the outside, all people were afraid of them, and because of the media, I suppose.
Yeah.
Did you kind of see that, or did it not?
No, I think that attitude towards us continued quite aware, even to here. I remember when Billy Bragg played here.
Yeah,
and it was a miners' benefit, and we raised a bag load of money that night. Do you know what I mean? And it was handed over to I can't remember what she was called. She I think she was quite important in the miners support group. And she got up on stage at the end of the night and said, I was terrified when I walked in here tonight, and I've always thought you were all a load of drug addict sort of maniacs, and words to that effect. And she said, my eyes have been opened. My eyes have been opened. It's been an amazing night. And so I think that sort of the way we looked and the way I looked and, you know, the way we carried ourselves possibly did scare the shit out of quite a few people. So there might have been an element to the, you know, I was walking around with slogans written on your jacket and all that stuff, you know. So there might have been an element of, you know, let's keep all this politicised youth out of the road. There might have been an element of that. But yeah, I think definitely. And there's a famous little bit on the BBC documentary where they interview the woman from the newsagents next door, and she says, "Oh yeah, they get in the shop and you know they're buying this and they're buying that, and they're all right, really." You know, so there was that sort of attitude. I think definitely.
So, I mean, can you remember the days of the you know, waking up? I've heard Christy's story of, and I've seen the photos of the devastation of the leisure centre roof coming off, which just, you know, is crazy. And knowing that, did it feel? I know he tells me that there was already talks about coming here or somewhere else before then anyway. Yeah. So it wasn't a case of, oh look, where's our house gone? It was you knew that it was going.
I was gutted, man. I was absolutely gutted. I didn't want to move here. I was like, can we not
mend it.
Get them to mend it. Can we not? And there was, you know, it was like, no, you're out. That's it. That's the only excuse they need. It's gone. So I was absolutely devastated when Green Terrace went. That was sort of the turning point for me. That was when I started.
I mean, you said about you know, spending more time in the office, you know, studying cans, but was that you'd seen it kind of coming almost, or if you'd stayed there, you would have.
It was always going to be a short shelf life at Green Terrace because it was dropping to bits, you know. It was dropping to bits, and I think that was just sort of the nail in the coffin, really. And it was badly damaged. You know, the water was pissing in, and I think we took all the lead off and took it down the sheepfolds and went out in the Albion and started off. We took it all down in a Mini.
Class.
The guy went, "Where'd you get this, lads?" He went, "Oh, we just found it. I think we got 25 quid or something. We went back to the Albion and
I'll have entertained
and that was it. That was sort of the end of the bunker party was paid for by the lead off the roof.
So, albeit you'd kind of seen your time coming to an end to some degree, I
didn't see it like that,
didn't you?
No, I didn't see it. I was all for. I don't want to paint the picture that that was it. I was all for making a go of it up here. Absolutely committed and still involved in that, all the meetings and et cetera, and involved with the publicity and all that. So I really wanted it to be the bunker. And it was the bunker. It was just different, and it was not the bunker that I loved. So I don't want to get the impression that I just always hated it here. I didn't. You know, I had some great nights here. Played a few gigs here and practice here, and you know, I was a key holder and led bands in and out and all kinds of stuff. So I was still committed to the place and absolutely believed in that. But it was just different. It was just different.
So were you doing other things? What kind of, you know, was your farewell? What kind of signalled that?
What, here?
Yeah.
Why did I drift off? I just think I think it was natural. The bands that were playing, I wasn't into. I used to live just over the road, and I was opening up for bands, and people knew that I lived over the road. So if somebody didn't turn up with the keys, they'd come over to mine, like on a Sunday morning, throw stones out the window. Booger, come and let us in. I was, for fuck's sake, you know. And in the end, I just thought, and it was a natural sort of drop off with me. So it wasn't just like overnight. I just sort of, I was getting older. I was doing different things, listening to different music. So it was just a natural drift away from me. And I would still pop in. I really liked Andy, and I would still pop in and read his Private Eye and have the odd night here. But it was just a natural move away, really.
Yeah.
And Andy and Christy and all that lot would sort of pick, they were really going for it, and Raf and all that lot. And they were really running with it. And so there was I was sort of surplus to requirement, I suppose. And not having the interest in that music didn't help.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was similarly, just up the road for a while, and, a few people throwing stones at my window to get us up. In fact, I remember Jerome once, about 8:30 in the morning, wanting to come in, book a practice, and so I just had to move out. Unfortunately, I couldn't, disappear.
I used to do my head in, it was just like, oh, wait on, lads, and you'd come over, and it would be 9 o'clock. I was telling the lads earlier on, I was hoping you were going to get onto this, because there was some nights I'd come over and be bands practicing, and they thought they were at Nebworth. There was this band called the Juggling Monkeys. They were like a heavy metal band, and I came in and they had it was like Spinal Tap when they were on them, like Marshall amps in a massive wall. It was like that. They had a monitor. Like he had his foot on the monitor. I walked in and I was like, just opened the door and they were all like rocking out and that, and I was just
come crashing back down to earth.
Yeah, well, lads. And then another night they were down on the stage and they'd let all the fire extinguishers off and just assholes, you know what I mean? And you were like, time to go, lads. So and they'd take another half hour to pack up, and then in the end you're just like, right, it's time for somebody else to have the keys.
Yeah, I think I obviously we were talking earlier on about how things have changed, and there was that period similarly where, because the pubs shut at 11, people would drag the 10 o'clock finish till 10:30 so they could go and go to the pub for half an hour or whatever. But now it's in a way it's a shame. It's changing. The kids are leaving 9:30 because they want to get in the gym, or they're gonna go home and sort of tend to their parents' gardens or whatever. But
there was a gym here. Did you know that? There was a gym
upstairs
here, and there was a gym at Green Terrace, but it wasn't that type of gym.
No.
And it's just totally different, and it's a different planet. I tell my son this, that he doesn't believe there was only three TV stations. He just doesn't believe it, and there was no mobile phones or apps. He just doesn't get it. And it was a different planet, Kenny. It was a different planet.
It's hard to comprehend, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I mean, I sound really old, but you think about how it was in the early 1980s when I left school. Teachers could still whack you around and pit you, and it was just a different planet. Yeah. But I think there's similarities, though, isn't there, with what it was like. And, I was just talking to the lads here earlier on about how it still is, especially after what's happened with COVID and that. It's a struggle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Venues are struggling, musicians are struggling, and that's a bit sad, because we were struggling and there was no venues, and so it's a weird sort of place we're at the minute. And you look at this room now and you're like, wow, it's amazing, but it's still difficult for people who are in, it's underfunded. Everything's the arts are underfunded, aren't they, Kenny?
Yeah, well, that's it. I think there are a lot of similarities between now and the 80s. Politically, socially, whatever. But you see, albeit kind of poles apart. And I think the difference being kind of socially, young people are different. Much more. I think we go on about generally when you grow up in the 80s, even the 90s to some degree, you'll have been the first thing you did when you got home from school was you went out. You played out. You didn't stay in. You went out to play, and I think now that young people don't do that, so it's a real challenge to try and get someone who's been brought up playing in the room, with devices and speaking to people with a headset in a different in a different country sometimes, trying to get them to come out and join form a band with 3 kids who they don't know, or go up and speak to somebody they don't know. It's just totally alien to them. And it's quite difficult. Hopefully sort of we can change that. So you 20 years ish after that, you were doing your MA. So don't have to say the exact dates. I know you probably can't think, but
2006 I did my MA.
So what? Yeah, so it wasn't that long. Yeah, about 20 years ish. And what your focus was I'd done a degree in photography, and then I left, and I was sort of doing this and that and the other, and working in youth work. Funny enough, I was a youth worker, and I worked for the Prince's Trust on something called Sound Live, which was music courses. So there was always a art sort of music element to what I was doing in youth work. That's the only thing that held my interest. But then when I went back to doing my MA, I sort of floundered a bit for the first couple of months. I didn't know what to do. And I can't remember why. I might have been going through some tapes or something, and I found the bunker video that Tommy made with Mick Catmull, and I put it on, and I was like, that's quite berserk, this really, and I was looking at some of the people, and I think I was looking at some of the people in the video, and some of them weren't here anymore. Either drifted off or were dead. So it sounds quite morbid, but photography is all about death anyway, isn't it? Yeah. Photography is about death. So I started looking into it. I looking at, right, well, I wonder what it would be like to photograph the people who were paying the video. Yeah. And I started just sort of putting the feelers out, and I went around to see Christy and Jill, and I hadn't seen them for a long time, and they had all these photographs. So I started pulling all this stuff together from my MA, and it just went mad. It went ballistic. All right, well, I'll do an archive. I'll make an online archive, and it was a free website. And within 3 months, it was full. There was no data left. Right. I went, right, what do I do now? People were sending me stuff from all over the place. Photographs, stories, leather jackets. Christy gave us a leather. Remember this? It was my old leather jacket that I used to wear. I don't know why he had it. And it just went mad. And I was like, right, well, so I'll buy a little bit bandwidth and put a few more photographs on. By the time I'd finished my MA, it was up to the maximum amount you could spend on it. It was costing us 175 quid a year, which doesn't sound loads, but at the time it was like, I haven't got it, you know what I mean? And it just went mad, and there was people emailing, the hits on it were crazy, and I was like, now the interest in this place is still, and you've seen what Christy and Christy and Andy are doing now. They sort of picked the baton up with it, didn't they? I dropped it because I couldn't afford to keep the website on. And when my MA was finished, I was like, well, that's done. Yeah. I'll move on. And we did the blue. Did you see the blue plaque? I did. I did all the blue plaque thing, and it was like, right, well, that's done. I'll put it to bed. But I think the momentum of that just is still going now with the Facebook group, and all that stuff. But I just didn't believe people had all this stuff. Tickets, posters, just everything. Minutes books. I had nought. I had absolutely nothing. I think there's not a day goes by where Christy finds something new, and I know he's always amazed. What was the kind of feedback from your lectures at the time and your masters?
I think they were a bit taken aback by it, because at first I went, I'm going to photograph people who were in a video 20 odd years ago, 30 odd years ago, and they went, all right, okay. And then I was like, and I'm doing a blue plaque and the echo coming down, and there's an archive, and I've got a website, and they were like, oh my God, where's all this coming from? And I went, I haven't got a clue. And they went, how are you going to exhibit it? And I went, I haven't got a clue. It was just so massive. But they were like, well, you've got to do that work, try that. So they were great, but I think they were a little bit nonplussed as to what it almost became. It was going to be an exhibition with prints, and it wasn't. It turned into something completely different. It turned into an archive that reflected. The name of the project was called Learning to Swim. Yeah, that was the name of the project, and it reflected that. You know, it was sort of, there was a double meaning there. You know, the boat sank from under our feet, didn't it?
Yeah.
In Sunderland, we had to learn to swim. I left school. My dad couldn't believe I couldn't get a start down the yards. You know, he left on Friday and started on Monday, and I went, "Oh, they're not taking anybody on, Dad." He thought I was taking the piss. So the boat sank from under our feet, literally. So part of what the bunker was about learning to swim, about finding your feet and making the best of what you had.
Yeah.
And that's what I was trying to get across in the MA, in the work, was that some of us learned to swim and moved on, and you had people who were running businesses and who had pharmacology degrees, and there was other people who had struggled and were still struggling, and there was other people who were dead. You know, so it was always about that sort of, you know. I
mean, I love the. I remember the opening page at the beginning was kind of your interpretation of a welcome and what it was, and I loved how kind of honest it was, and how it, you know, didn't necessarily, it opened my eyes and like kind of what
the website.
Yeah. And thinking back, that idea of a digital archive were probably, I know there were ones in, you know, in museums or whatever, but it was, say, 15 years ago now, you know, and funny enough, it's something that I feel we now needs to be developed, you know, locally, historically, you know, culturally, to be able to, for, you know, I think it's an important part of local history that people can see, not just how it began, but how it evolved and how all of these people have got involved. And albeit the Facebook group is great, it's probably not necessarily the place you want to put them there. But to say that idea that wasn't your initial idea, but ended up kind of, you know, spawning this archive was a wonderful thing, really, and I hope that we can try and you know, develop it further. Really.
Yeah, definitely. I think it needs the story needed to be told, and it needed to be told by people who were involved in it, and that spans, you know, 5 or 6 different parts of the history of the town, doesn't it? You know, there was the Borough Road and the Greenhurst, and then the Stockton Road, what you do, and the bit between. You know, so it's you know, it's an institution. I never thought I'd say that, but it's an institution in the town, so the bunker, and its history's massive, you know, and it needs to be recorded properly. And the archive just seemed like a natural way to do it, really.
Well, I hope, you know, in, well, maybe not 40 years' time, but, you know, I'm kind of sitting here and or with somebody else who's carried the mantle and kind of took it on, and albeit that probably seems as alien, it sounds as alien to me as maybe it did to you back then. But I'm hoping it does. Yeah,
I can't see any reason why not, really. You know, it's just about, you know, you got lads sat here who, you know, are a quarter of our age, and they're sitting at mixing desks and they're playing music, and that's what it's always been about. Was about that sort of, you know, it was about music. It was music. It was about music.
Yeah.
You know, that sometimes gets forgotten about, that it was about music, and that'll never, you know, you can be in the gutter and you can still hum a tune in your head, can't you?
Yeah.
It's not going to change, and young people are always going to gravitate towards that. And I think that's part of why the Bunkers continues to be here.
Yeah,
because young people love music.
Yeah, but that's it. Let's see. I hope you know, it keeps going and I hope we manage to get across the message of, you know, why it started, why, because there were probably people sitting at home, kids who you know, have a inkling and who you know, maybe just need that kick of the arse to get them out and to get involved in something, whereas, you know, 40 years ago, you got that literally got that kick up the arse to get out of the house, and they don't have that now. And so hopefully, you know, we have them and we can, they'll come and get involved and take it on for the 40 years.
It's going to be more difficult. I think it's difficult for young people now, and they've got the whole social media thing that sort of keeps them locked into a certain way of thinking and a certain way of dealing with things and interacting with each other, and it's different. It's different from when we were interacting. You know, you learned it by looking at a poster, didn't you? You didn't look at your phone because we didn't have them. So it's different. But I don't think You know, that's carried bands to stardom, though, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, social media's carried bands to sort of absolute beat. My phone's gone. I'm sorry. So I think it's important, and it's an amazing thing. The internet and social media and the way young people look at music is different, and the way they listen to music is different. I just think you've got to adapt to that, haven't you? I'm sure the bunker will adapt to it. Why wouldn't it?
Yeah. So, you moved away. You say you've you're now a lecturer, and you've done.
I'm not a lecturer. I work in a sixth form college,
Okay.
so I work in the art department.
Okay.
So I'm a technician, really.
Right, okay.
When I moved down to Yorkshire, I took my business. I was self-employed photographer. I moved down to Yorkshire. My wife's a nurse. She had 2 girls at school down there, so it just seemed natural for me to move. And I was ready for a change. I needed to take my business down there rather than her coming up here, really.
Yeah.
So when I moved down, it was like, right, my business, I had quite good word of mouth up here, and it went from that to that overnight. So I had to do something to sort of pay the bills, basically. So a bit teaching work came up with technician sort of side to it. So I'm not paid as a teacher. I'm sort of an instructor. Mm-hmm. So it's all, which suits me down to the ground because I haven't got any marketing to do. Yeah. So yeah, I work in a sixth form college in the art department with a sort of 3 days a week photography. It's great. Mm-hmm. It's great.
So do you see the difference in kids at that college to compare to kids that you were and your peers at the time? Are there any similarities?
No, I think I don't know. I can only relate it to the way photography is and the way music is, really. Which was, in terms of photography, it's shifted on its head since I got into it. When I did my HND at Newcastle, it was 90% male, and it's completely flipped on its head now. Okay. So lads are in the absolute minority on photography courses now. You get 1 or 2 out of 30 maybe. So that's properly flipped round. And when I was photographing weddings, you'd have the odd female photographer. That's totally different now. So if you Google wedding photographers Leeds now, all it's women. And that can only be a good thing, really, can it? I mean, it was properly riddled with old school backslapping, aren't we great type of attitudes, which I was confronted with when I first started. Being a working class lad from Sunderland and dealing with some of the old school photographers wasn't very much fun. Standing up meetings just being ignored. Like your professional meetings and stuff. Yeah, it's bollocks. So that's changed, and that's reflected in college for absolute definite. So there's a lot more young women taking it up. Music wise, I don't know. It's like you speak to young people and they don't go to see bands anymore. From my experience, maybe I'm just talking to the wrong sets of young people, but the people who go to see live music are not as prevalent as they used to be. Mm-hmm. At Huddersfield College, I don't know.
Well, I think it my time locally involved in further education. I think that a lot of kids who might study music, not all of them form bands. For those that do form bands, are in a few bands and are a big part of the scene. And I think Sunderland's benefited from that over the past few years. And there is a nice little kind of network of a load of bands. But I think there is still a lot of, and albeit I think the kids now with streaming kind of platforms at their fingertips, and they're probably as interested in music, even pre-COVID. I agree in that I still think a lot of them were less likely to get on the metro and go to the gig. I think, yes, the odd one would, but at a very maybe well-behaved gig, possibly with the parents. And I remember going to a couple of gigs at the academy and was a year before COVID and was actually quite taken aback by the mix of the audience and how many middle-aged parents. And I was like, I didn't know whether that was a reflection of the music I was going to, whether I was just, and the kids looking from 15 up to sort of people up to 50 odd, and I didn't know whether it was people going out with families. Whereas when I was younger and I went to gigs, it was just everyone was kind of what looked like 16 to 20, and everyone was drinking pints of Snakeback and just kind of going to see it felt more grassroots. So it maybe the gig going thing has changed. You mentioned about kids going, oh yeah, I went to a festival, which isn't necessarily I know it focuses live music, but it's not like going to see bands.
Like Leeds Fest, it's like a rite of passage Leeds Fest, isn't it? You did they come in at the beginning of the term and they've all been to Leeds Fest. They're all deaf in one ear and got really bad hangovers and because they've been shouting at each other and but the it's a rite of passage. Both of my stepdaughters went to Leeds Fest, and it was sort of to do with the music, but not really. It was because that's what they do. They go to Leeds Fest. So it's not the same as going to see a band at a venue with 80 people there. It's different. It's different. And you can't blame them for that. I'm not blaming them. I'm not slagging them off for not going to venues with 80 people. It's just different. And the way people consume music's different, isn't it? I've got a device in my phone that I can listen to anything that I want to. It's insane. And so the way people consume music's massively different, and the way they produce music's different. And it's so I'm not sort of, this isn't a sort of attack and young people for not wanting to go to see bands. It's just it's a different world. It's a different world.
So you've gone through some major illnesses, like being down there.
I have.
Yeah. How you feel now, and how's that been compared to some other things you've gone through?
Yeah. I'm good. I had a big scare about 6 or 7 years ago. I had cancer, and which sort of knocked me for 6. Really, it wasn't a very pleasant time. It's the words you don't want to hear is, "I'm afraid you got cancer, Mr. Maven," and not the type of words you want to hear when you're still in your 50s. So it wasn't, but I'm good. It was weird. I've just had a really old fart stuff. I've just had a hernia operation, Kenny. I had a hernia, and when they ran through the list of ailments that I've had, you do this pre-op thing, and so Mr. Maven, you've had cancer, and you've had 3 lots of back surgery, and you've had 2 knee operations, and you've had half of your thyroid removed, and I was like, Jesus Christ, I'm dead. I'm nearly dead. I'm like a robot. But I cycled 3 times a week last year, before my hernia knocked it on the head. So I don't feel like I look on paper. I feel quite all right, I feel good after that proper scare. And it puts a lot of things in perspective. Really puts things in perspective. So I maybe had a bit of a reputation for liking the odd drink, Kenny. I don't know whether you've heard that.
Well, I think not in a defamatory way. I think everyone derogatory way.
I was a pisshead, Kenny. I was an absolute pisshead, and I drank for England. When I was, I had a reputation for it, and that and smoking fags and this, that, and the other, and it comes and bites you on the arse eventually. As the list of people who are no longer with us has proved. John, just a few years older than me. I'm not saying he was into all that, but too young. And the list of people of my contemporaries who are not here is A, really sad, and B, far too long for our age. And there's a myriad of reasons, and I'm not the one to sit and work out why that's happened. But it is a long list. It's a frightening long list. And when you have a scare like that, I just think it knocks you for 6, man. And so I barely drink, and I don't drink much anymore. I've had a bit of a rough time this year with lockdown, where I'm just bored. So it's went up a bit, but you know,
Yeah.
it's not compared to what I used to be like.
Yeah.
And I just think when you've got kids and you've got a wife and you've got, you know, and you have that type of scare, it does properly put a different spin on things. So.
I think I remember a few years ago going to a funeral of a friend and thinking, you know, I feel like I'm now at the age where some of your friends your age are starting to pass away, and you realise that you're mortal and you're not invincible like you thought you were when you were 30. But you know, fortunately, I'm stayed reasonably fit. But I mean, how long did it take you to get through all that and to start feeling that you were
when I had cancer?
Yeah.
It was quite a while. I had a lot of radiotherapy, and it was awful. And you know, I was sleeping 23 and a half hours a day at one point. Waking up to be taken to get more radiotherapy and then go back to sleep. I was falling asleep in the waiting room, you know. So it's a bit of a blur towards the end. And then it took us I was just tired, really tired. For a long time, it took me quite a while to get back to feeling anywhere like human.
Did it feel like that? Felt just such a long slog at the time?
Yeah, mentally as well.
Yeah.
Mentally. You know, you're going in, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but you're going in every, you know, I had Christmas Day and Boxing Day off. So I was getting my radiotherapy over Christmas. So, and it's mentally challenging, you know. Everybody's sitting having a Christmas dinner. I had a tube up my nose because I couldn't swallow, you know what I mean? Getting fed out of a bag. And that's mentally challenging.
Yeah.
So, and going in every day and doing the same thing and getting the radiotherapy and feeling progressively worse and worse and worse and worse. And then you've got to, right, that's it, you're done now. That's your last session. See you later. And then you've got to try and pull yourself back up and bring yourself back to some sort of normality. And it wrecks your taste. So I couldn't taste anything. I couldn't swallow anything. Couldn't eat anything. So it was that was the hard bit for me. You know, physically, I sort of, it was caught early, so I got away with it, really. Got away with it. But mentally, the challenge of it is, you know, I could see what I was doing to Louisa, my wife. You know, she's a nurse. She was incredible, but I could see what it was doing to her, you know, and it's that side of it. I think it's from hearing those words that you never want to hear, to getting your head around it. All right, I've got it. This is what I need to do. This is what's going to happen to me. And then pulling yourself back to some sort of normality. That's the hard thing about having cancer, I think. But it's easy for me to say that because I recovered. And, you know, I just think for me, that was the mental challenge.
Yeah.
It was hard.
Has that helped you, you know, that overcoming those because of COVID, or has it actually kind of been worse and brought things back? That sort of, you know, you're being kind of sometimes isolated and stuck and knowing whether things are going to get better or going to get worse?
I don't know. I've never really thought about that, to be honest. I've been quite on it with COVID in terms of sticking to things and the rules, and you know, my wife's a nurse, she works in care homes, so we've been absolutely. But I didn't look at it as though as having cancer helped me get through that. I didn't really. To be honest, you know, your mind's got a really powerful tool in there, hasn't it? In terms of it can shut things off that haven't been very nice, and that's what happened to me with cancer. Really, I've got to really sort of dredge it up. So it didn't really occur to me. It was just like, oh, well, this is another thing that we've got to deal with. It wasn't about, oh, it's going to be easier because I've gone through cancer. I don't think. But yeah, I you know, my outlook on things is definitely different. In terms of the way I carry myself now. So I sort of try and look after myself a bit, and I never did.
So I'm kind of trying to, we started off here talking about, the getting involved in the bunker and, as it's come up to the 40th anniversary, but it's a conversation between, two friends. And I, not seen a great deal of you, but I know you've been through loads of ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
You touched earlier on, we were just talking off screen about raising money after death of your daughter. Can you tell us a little bit about that and kind of and how how you were able to go out and then try and raise some money and how that helped? Because obviously it was such a great gig, but it must be hard to
it was
do
a good
that kind
gig.
of-
It was a good gig, and that gig came about on the day of Ellen's funeral. Ellen died when she was 13 days old, so she had a very rare, incredibly rare genetic thing going on. So rare it doesn't even have a name. So, like 47 cases in the last 10 years or something like that. It's ridiculous. So she died when she was just under 2 weeks old. So at a funeral, I've never had a chance to thank everybody for coming to Ellen's funeral. It was humbling, the amount of people who turned up. So I remember walking down, and we didn't want any flowers, and I walked down, and I've just got this memory of people coming past me and leaving a single flower on the steps, and it was covered. Out the crown, it was covered, so it was quite. And I've never had a chance to thank people for doing that, because that meant like a lot.
Yeah,
meant a lot. And when we went back, there was lots of people came back, and we had some drinks, and Frankie Stubbs was there. And he went, "We should do a gig." And I went, "Yeah, let's do a gig. And I never thought much more of it, really. And then it sort of happened. I was like, shit. I was in a band called the Burt Reynolds Five, and we'd sort of split up. Tim had moved to Ireland to work. 2 weeks before T in the Park rang us, the bastard. He moved, and 2 weeks later I got a ring from T in the Park saying, "Do you want to come and play?" But we'd split up.
wow.
And
Missed out on all that book fast.
never forgive him for that. And we went, "Yeah, let's do a gig. So and Norman was like, "Oh, you have Frankie?" So, "Well, we'll play. So Leatherface played, and we played, and we raised. Oh God, I can't remember. It was getting over $2,000. I don't know. It was a good amount of money for the baby unit, who were amazing. The baby unit were amazing, and so we got that. And then I did an app sale. I hate heights. I did a charity app sale, and we got some money that way. So yeah, it was a good night, and it was the last gig I ever played. Yeah. Last time I was ever on stage was that gig. So I suppose it was a nice way to sort of stop, really. And Leatherface were awesome, and we played Led Zeppelin.
Yeah. And have you had the urge to
always,
pick the bass up? Yeah,
always. Yeah. It's weird. Because I still love going to see live music, Kenny. Part of the reason to move to Leeds was to go and, I love Broodnell and the wardrobe. The Leeds has just got some cracking venues and that. So I try and get to see bands as much as possible. And whenever I'm at a gig, I'm like, and you know what it's like when you're playing on stage. I know when I played with Patrick, with John and Jim and Phil, we played some big gigs, and we played some good support slots with New Model Army and people like that. And you never, that never leaves you, does it? Never, that buzz never really leaves you. So there's times when I just think, and when I got married, my brother-in-law, Hugh's a drummer, and he said, "Oh, we should do something." And I went out and bought an amp, and all of a sudden, I hadn't had an amp. I'd never owned an amp. I had one amp in my life, and it got nicked from Green Terrace. And it ended up on Hilton Road. My bass, which was a Fender copy, and this beautiful flight-cased amp, and it got nicked. It ended up in Hilton Road. So I never owned an amp. So I went out and bought this little Fender amp, and I've got my Fender Precision. I was like dead excited. And he went, "Oh, we've got a bass player." So I was like, Yeah, I did it. I've got no real, I wouldn't do it now. I don't think. I was asked a couple of weeks ago. A lad who used to go to the Union Bar where we used to drink the Langham, was in a band down in Wakefield, and I got an email just out of the blue saying, "Oh, we're reforming," and I thought of you. I need a bass player. I can't really play anyway. I've got old man's fingers. And,
It's nice to have that idea, though, isn't it? I mean, I hung my microphone up a number of years ago, but same. I think you watch something and think, I've still got it. But I mean, obviously, the more and more bands now that are coming in are getting the bands back together. Kids have flown the nest or grown up and they don't need kind of looking after, and they're getting the bands back together. But you're just keeping that idea in the background.
I've never really, I'm a bit of a snob. I'm a bit of a snob like that. You like people say, I went to see the Buzzcocks recently, and I was like, and because I saw them in 1978 with like, if that's my son, there's my son. Because I saw them in 1978, I'm a proper snob, man. I'm a snob. So I'm like, well, how could that possibly be topped? How could that be topped? So I've never bought into the going to see bands that have reformed thing ever. The only time I've ever done it was because I didn't see them first time around. I'm a massive Super Furry Animals fan. I love them. I love everything they've ever done, but I've never seen them. And when they did the Radiator tour and the Fuzzy Logic tour, I bought a ticket, and they were amazing because I'd never seen them. But it was like it was a reunion tour. But it's the first time I've ever done it, and I've never been to see any of the original. I saw most of the original punk bands, bar the Pistols and the Slits. I saw most of them. But I've never been to see them afterwards. I kind of bring myself to do it because I've got these amazing memories of seeing the Damned and the Clash and Buzzcocks and Susie and the Band, all these amazing bands that I saw in the late 70s, and I kind of bring myself. I don't know what to see Captain Sensible when he's in his 70s.
I mean, you're kind of spoiled for choice in a way now, and the amount of revivalist bands going and playing in festivals, and there's a few locally, and they're always so well attended with 30, 40, 50 somethings who can who can appreciate and drink a load of beer. So for the promoter, it's great. I'm similar, and it's probably not my cup of tea. So albeit all of my friends are going, great. I managed to do it.
I'm not slagging it off. Don't get me, and I think there's a horrible attitude in the UK, especially, isn't there? With you're old now, so you can't be in a band. What a load of shit. So I'm not slagging anybody off for doing it and still wanting to do it. It's just not, as you say, it's not my cup of tea. And who's to say that you get to a certain age and you have to hang your guitar up or your microphone up? Bollocks to that. I'm not into that at all. But I'm just not. I kind of do it.
No, it's fair enough. I think when something's going to spoil your magic, your kind of memories of it, it's
phenomenal memories. You know what I mean? I don't seeing bands like that at the time was an amazing thing. I was really lucky to get to see them, and I don't want to sully that. I'm a snob, man. Proper snob.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Right. Well, Bugger. Thank you so much for coming. I've loved chatting on with you.
Really enjoyed it.
I'm glad you've managed to come back in and get a feel of the place. And,
it's great. It's great.
But thanks so much.
No bother.
See you again, sir.
No bother.
Right.